Who remembers Lost Vikings? If you don't, that's understandable. Their last official appearance, not counting re-releases, was what? Heroes of the Storm? Well, before their employees were known for stealing breast milk from the company fridge, in the mid to late 90s, Silicon and Synapse made a series of 2D platformers, and the gimmick was that you controlled the three of them individually, and used their unique abilities to solve puzzles. A neat idea that unfortunately didn't really catch on in the mainstream. I'd even argue that Lost Vikings wasn't that good either, but I've been obsessed with this gimmick for a number of years, so I'm kinda sad that this kind of puzzle game isn't seen as much. The few examples that come to mind result in some underbaked ideas, where one of your abilities is pulling a lever, or something more like Trine, where it doesn't fully commit to controlling all three characters independently. But apparently, I'm not the only one who wanted more Lost Vikings. Because today, we're talking about Greak, Memories of Azur, a puzzle platformer Metroidvania made by Navigante Entertainment, a small 8-person studio based in Mexico City. Before it came out, I remember being super hyped for this game, and there wasn't an insignificant amount of coverage for its release either. But 4 years later, I don't really hear people talking about it. So, with this review, I'm here to find out if Greak is an underrated classic, or maybe there's a reason it fell out of the public eye. Now, because of the nature of Greak, I'm not really going to cover the endgame, because most of the story is conveyed to you within the first 20 minutes. I'll still tackle this in sections like I normally would, just no spoiler section this time around. Now let's start from the top. In the land of Azur, the native Korean people have been locked in bloody conflict against the Urlags, violent marauders that recently learned to control the all-corrupting darkness only known as the Plague, smothering the living and converting the dead into their thralls. Little is known about the origin of the Plague, only that it was contained by our ancestors prior to the war, but with our efforts stretched so thin, it threatens to spread across the continent. The fighting has gotten so bad that most of the Koreans are ready to just cut their losses and abandon their homeland. The only problem is that crossing the sea isn't an option. Our only hope would be an airship that hasn't even been built yet. The hull of the ship, not even an issue. All we need is the power of an ancient element that is the literal primordial lifeblood of our species, just so we could use it as a car battery. And that's where we come in. We start the game as the titular Greek, having presumably escaped from a zone of conflict, is currently looking for his 2 older siblings. Greek is not the child of destiny. He's just a child, and the first thing Greak does while on his search is get jumped by a bunch of plague-infested fauna, and each by almost recreating that scene from the other guys. Found by some fellow Korean scouts, if we agree to help find materials for their airship, we can all leave together with some of our culture intact. And that's it. No heroic calling, no prophetic destiny. Find your siblings, grab your stuff, and get the f*** out. It's a refreshingly simple premise from the perspective of an otherwise normal person in this setting. I'm a huge fan of games where your protagonist isn't necessarily the hero. You're not here to rid the land of the invaders and save the day, you just live here. Your protagonist status only comes from being the most capable among the wounded, weary, and scant few that actually made it to this ramshackle village. But enough exposition. Let's talk about the presentation. In various interviews and promotional material, Navigante wants you to know that Greak's visuals are entirely hand-drawn. And what's here is pretty good. Ghibli movies and Lord of the Rings were noted as inspirations, with more of an emphasis on the latter. You get the impression of how desperate this mission is. Unless you're paraplegic and stuck to your bed, you're helping make this airship. The somber tone is also reflected in the game's art style. Koreans, as a species, literally radiate light, but while Greak and his siblings all have this radiant glow and even these particles of light that come off them, in contrast, all the secondary characters have a more faded and washed out color, and some of them don't even glow, which when paired with the kind of gloomy tone of the environments, really expresses how tired the Korean are. Their lands are being infected by the plague, and the invaders are at their door, and their only escape is to desperately construct an airship in unideal conditions. All of the enemies you face unfortunately share the same muddy brown tones, and while the Urlags themselves don't stray too far from the generic marauder design wearing their furs and animal skulls, I honestly find find the plagues way more interesting. You can tell there was a lot of care put into emphasizing how threatening the plague is as a force of nature. I get the impression that the plague is a parasite, an amorphous blob that is piloting the corpses of the fallen, with their only goal being aggressive expansion. The Koreen, animals, even plants aren't safe from this thing. And even if you don't practice mental gymnastics like me and find these designs kind of boring, that guy just got cut in half, and oh man, he's still going. It's a nice visual contrast to see the enemies that could literally blend into the background get illuminated by your ambient glow. And while we're on the topic of atmosphere, one of Greek's strongest aspects would be its sound design and music. If I could put it into words, Greak's music is cinematic fantasy. Navigante did get a whole orchestra to record the game's music, so there are no complaints here. There's a reason I used the first track in the OST for that intro. If I could mention anything against it, I would just say that it's familiar. Fantasy strings, wind instruments, the works. It's somber, while still showing a hint of whimsy in some tracks. Like, despite the implications of everything, it's still an adventure. The music outside of boss fights don't really have specific triggers, but plays a bit after exploring, which means that some tracks can play very often. But with the Tolkien influences mentioned earlier, I wonder how much of Howard Shore was taken as inspiration here. But the thing that undeniably brings the game to life would be its atmosphere. The environmental sound design is pretty good. Without the music in some sections, the feeling is creepy, atmospheric, or just downright unwelcoming. Now, with the nature of a game like this, controlling 3 characters, all with their own abilities, can come off as a bit daunting. But make no mistake, Greak's gameplay is real simple. You explore to get quest items, find upgrades in the form of relics, and sometimes find shortcuts to previous areas. All the marks of a Metroidvania, but I didn't find myself going back to old areas too often. If you're even mildly curious, you'll be able to find most, if not all, the secrets this game has to offer. The game tells you to explore areas thoroughly, but is not handholdy or anything, unless it's literally out in the open like this. The real heart of the game comes from our 3 leads. Greak is the youngest and most balanced out of the 3. He has a short sword for closer encounters, and a crossbow with limited ammo. His only weakness being he can't swim for very long. Adara is the middle child and a mid-spellcaster, with abilities that are more movement forward. And lastly, Raydell, the oldest and coolest out of the 3, complete with a big shield, glowing sword, and a grappling hook. But due to his heavy armor, he can't swim at all. Greak is a short and very forgiving game. The tether system, for example, helps to not make controlling 2 characters an absolute nightmare. When linked up, they follow your every input. The sibling that you aren't controlling can still attack automatically. This is good for keeping Adara at a distance while you fight up close. You can also recall them closer to your primary character, or just leave them behind altogether. Unlike Lost Vikings, all 3 siblings are more versatile than they appear. All 3 characters can attack, 2 of them have ranged options, and even though all 3 can interact with the same puzzle, you don't have to keep them together. The world is one giant level, so you can even leave one of them back at town or in another dungeon entirely. While a cool addition, rarely are you able to progress without having more than one character in your party, so this is more for seeking out optional content, and even then, there isn't a lot here. There is a point, though, where this ease of access makes me question a few things. For a good 3/4 of my playthrough, the game feels less like it takes inspiration from Lost Vikings, and more adopts the puzzle philosophy of something like RE0. You have 2 characters with distinct traits. In both games, there are instances where instead of being forced to use different characters based on the unique abilities, both characters are capable enough to be used in most situations, and it's mainly down to who do you want to use for this next section. And while it was frustrating in RE0, in Greak it feels a bit, I don't know, underwhelming. Outside of secret hunting, for a good chunk of the game, it feels like I wasn't cleverly using each character for their specific abilities. As far as combat is concerned, it felt like I was playing the Ice Climbers. Most major combat encounters can be handled by blobbing the enemy to death. I understand the decision here. If encounters were more intricate and more micro-intensive, players could be easily overwhelmed. And there's even a boss fight where to prevent getting both players absolutely smashed, you can just leave one on the platform above and just swap between them when needed. It's considerate, but nothing here really challenges me until the last area of the game, where it truly feels like Navigante can finally spread their wings. But what if there was a boss fight where your characters were split up? What about a boss that emphasizes everyone's unique movement? Seeing how interesting the last area was when it came to the puzzles, it feels like some people are being held back here. And while we're talking about lost potential, I want to cap off the video by talking about something that really stung: character designs and their implications. Let's start with Greak. He's dressed in autumn colors, a dull orange tunic with matching pants, shoes, and a scarf? What is that? These colors fit his character because of his fascination with a sect of Korean knights known as the Scouts, acting as both reconnaissance for military tactics and for scouting potential territory. They're wartime park rangers, and while Greek's clothing doesn't try to mimic the uniform of the Scouts, it's easy to see his connection to nature. That cowlick swirl on the top of his head is the same symbol that's present on his scarf. It's the icon that Adara uses to mark the trees in order to guide Greek. And even looking at his design head-on, it almost resembles a swirl pattern you'd see on something like Brawlin. Raydell has a similar philosophy with his earthy colors, and while there's less going on with his design, it gets more interesting when comparing him to the other Scouts. His shade of green is stronger, deeper, like he has more life in him than the others that are forced to defend this village, suggesting that despite him being the oldest sibling, he's not weary or even as old as someone like Zack, who wields a nicked blade and is covered in simple robes. Who knows what he's been through? But Adara, I have lists to say. Where Greek's clothing reminded us that this is a child in a shirt that's a little too big for him, Adara's dress helps highlight her mystical traits, like how it flows when she floats. But what sticks out to me is the red. Out of everything they decided to highlight, it was her shoes, which might hint to the player that she has the most mechanics tied to her movement. Not only can she float, but curiously, she's the only one who can swim for long periods of time. Raydell is weighed down by his armor, for sure, but not giving the aqua lung to the kid who's most like a scout is an interesting choice. This could have been expanded upon, like her training as an oracle had her undergo not only mystical training of the mind, but physical trials to strengthen her said mental training and... While the designs do well to make them stand out and highlight their mechanical differences between them, this kind of lore speculation is the result of one of the more troubling problems I have with this game. They really didn't tell us anything about our leads. This whole section so far has just been conjecture. Outside of my stream of consciousness, the truth of it is that personality-wise, this game falls kinda flat. Greek and his siblings honestly don't feel like characters to me. The irony of there being unique flavor text for each sibling is that everything tastes the same. Everyone responds in a similar fashion, and the only real interaction we have with most of these side characters boils down to asking which direction the next thing you gotta collect is. There are some unique questions you can ask certain NPCs depending on who you're controlling, but I can't glean anything from their dialogue. It's so sparse. No internal monologues, no thoughts about life before all this. Does Greek hate the taste of elixirs while Raydell secretly likes them like a big weirdo? I don't know. It's also frustrating because there's something here. I've seen this all before. And yeah, due to the sense of urgency you have throughout the story, I'm not expecting a JRPG worth of character arcs, but I need something more for me to care about these characters, other than Raydell and I are brothers. What? To many, most games can be distilled to the most exciting parts. People can become obsessed with the macro events of a game, hype moments and aura that make for good meme material. But it's the smaller things, character animations, voice acting, lines of flavor text. I don't hate Greek or anything. It's just what's lacking stings so much because it could have been more interesting, instead of just being okay. Is Greek worth playing? If you have some time to kill and you want to get it on a sale, then sure, go for it. That last hour of gameplay is enough for me to recommend. If you're looking for a short puzzle platformer to play in an afternoon, an okay 3 to 4 hour experience. Greek's biggest flaw is that it doesn't do anything extraordinarily well. It's not a bad game, but there isn't really anything here that makes me want to come back. Maybe there's a reason we haven't seen a successor to the Lost Vikings. I've yet to play a full puzzle game where they ran with the whole moving multiple characters gimmick, and it worked well enough for me to recommend. Anyway, thanks for watching. As always, I got more in the pipeline, but I'm open to recommendations. Take care of yourselves, and see you next time.